and let's make sure we think about the people who are less fortunate than us. So on that note, one of the things I do want to talk about, I'll remind you about it now, and then I'll remind you about it a little bit later. Ramadan Radio is working with the Leicester Hospitals charity, and what we're doing this year is we are trying to raise some money for the Children's Hospital. We've got a Just Giving page, Just Giving Fundraising Ramadan Radio, and the Children's Hospital are raising money to buy Eid gifts for children who'll be spending Eid Day in hospital. So if you want to go to our Just Giving page and put a smile on a child's face with your donation, that would be alhamdulillah. Anyway, on to the show today. I've got two ladies. I've got Mariya, who is a paramedic, and I've got Yusra, who is a practice nurse. And both ladies are going to talk about their experiences in the medical profession. And I would like to encourage the listeners to text or WhatsApp in if they have any questions. So the WhatsApp number is 077 48 855 055. So that's 077 48 855 055. So if you've got any questions for Mariya, if you've got any questions for Yusra, then please do message in. So I'm going to start with Mariya. Assalamu alaikum, Mariya.
Wa alaikum assalam.
It's lovely to have you in the studio. So a little bit about Mariya, and then I'll ask her some questions, and hopefully she can tell you a little bit about herself. So Mariya is a paramedic, and my understanding is that means she drives an ambulance, which I think is very exciting. So inshallah, I'm going to ask Mariya to introduce herself, and then hopefully I'll ask her some questions.
So assalamu alaikum, my name is Mariya. I'm 25 years old and I've recently graduated as a paramedic. So I studied paramedic science for 3 years at university, and yeah, alhamdulillah, I've just finished and I've started working as a paramedic full time.
Okay, so Mariya, will you tell the listeners at home what you studied at school and what you studied at college to kind of pave the way to this amazing career?
Okay, so GCSEs approximately, I received about 12 GCSEs.
Okay.
A star to C's, and I went to Moat Community College.
MashaAllah.
So, and then after that, I went to do my A-levels at Gateway College, and I studied biology, sociology, and forensic science.
Okay, can I just ask, is it very specific? So if you want to be a paramedic, are there specific GCSEs and specific A-levels that you have to do?
Yeah, so you need maths and English at GCSE, and also at A-level, you need at least one science.
Okay, so that's why you've done the biology?
Yes, and then forensic science kind of, that can act as a science as well. And then if you do, for example, health and social care, that can be a science as well. So yeah, at A-levels, I did them 3. So a requirement is at least one science.
Okay, and then did you study in Leicester or did you go elsewhere to study for university?
So after Gateway College, I went to Coventry University, and that's where I studied paramedic science. However, there's actually another route into paramedics.
Okay, go on, tell us what it is.
If I could go back and someone would have advised me back then, I would have picked that route.
So what's this other route? Other route?
It's like an apprentice route,
okay,
where you learn on the job and you get paid at the same time.
Okay, so I'm just going to recap that for the audience. So if you're young out there and you're thinking about career choices, what Mariya's just told us is you can go to university, but she's also told us there is a route where you can get paid, and it's an apprenticeship route. And she said that's the route that she would much prefer to take. Okay, Mariya, do carry on.
Yeah, so if I could go back, I would definitely take that route because I'm more of a hands-on person.
Okay.
I learn on the job. With university, you do get 50% placement and 50% theory, but definitely, yeah, I'd do that route because now I'm in debt. God knows how much.
Inshallah, may Allah make it easy for you. So going back to, so obviously the apprenticeship route you said is obviously, you're learning on the job. When you talk about 50% placement and you talk about 50% at university, what did you do in your placement?
So what happens is you would have lab sessions, you would have practical sessions and OSCEs. So they would teach you certain skills, and then what you would do is you'd have a block of placement where you'd go out, you'd get to practice those skills. You have a mentor that will mentor you out on the road, and you'll start off as baby steps and then go into more like technical skills, and they will sign you off as you go along the 3 years. It's like a portfolio. However, with the apprentice route, you would do mainly out on the road for 2 years, and then maybe go to uni, like maybe just for 6 months.
A couple of days, probably a couple of days a week.
Just the last part to get everything signed off, but you would mainly be out on the road, exposed to everything.
Wow.
A lot more than being in a classroom at university and having lectures.
Okay, so you went off to Coventry. So did you stay in Coventry and do all your kind of route outside work in Coventry?
So with placement, they placed us with West Midlands Ambulance Service.
Okay.
So if you did it now, so what happened was when I started university, they weren't offering it at De Montfort Uni, but now they are actually offering it there. So if you start doing it with DMU, then they would place you with like East Midlands Ambulance Service. But I did it with Coventry, so I was placed with West Midlands Ambulance Service.
Okay, that sounds fascinating. Right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring Yusra into the conversation, then we'll talk more about being a paramedic. So my other guest is Yusra. And Yusra is a practice nurse. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to ask her what a practice nurse is so that she can explain to us what the differences are.
Assalamu alaikum everyone. So a practice nurse works at a GP surgery, so it's completely different from ward nursing, or traditional ward nursing.
Okay, brilliant. So you just tell the listeners a little bit about you and a little bit about what you do and a little bit, just a kind of introduction.
So I'm an adult nurse by background. I qualified in 2018 and I went straight into primary care, which is quite an unusual route for newly qualified nurses to go into.
Okay.
So it's more working with patients who have long-term conditions rather than acute unwell patients in hospitals.
Right, so tell the listeners a little bit about kind of what qualifications, because Mariya told us a little bit about the kind of GCSE she did, the A-level she did and the route she took. What about yourself?
My route was pretty much the same as Mariya. But there are other ways of getting through too. So there's a nurse associate program which they have. There's nurse apprenticeships as well. So it's not just A-levels that you have to take to get into nursing.
Okay. And did you, like Mariya, did you have to have specific A-levels?
Yeah, exactly the same. One science,
Okay, so they asked for one science. And did you stay in Leicester to study?
I preferred to stay at DMU. I'm a local girl,
Okay, and so Mariya said she would have rather taken the apprenticeship route. What are your thoughts?
A-levels were quite difficult, but I do prefer exams over assignments, which is probably why I struggled a bit at uni. I don't know how you were, Mariya, but assignments really killed me. But I prefer having done exams at A-levels.
Okay, and you prefer having done the 3 years at university?
Yeah.
So what kind of things did you have to do at university? Did you put you on placements? Did you go out into the hospitals? What did you do?
Exactly the same as Mariya, so 50% placement, 50% theory. But with our placements, there was I think there would be a bit more variation in where we could go, because we had the hospitals, we had community, and different areas within the hospital as well.
Okay, elaborate a little bit more. So the hospitals, obviously most listeners who are in Leicester will know we've got the Leicester General Hospital and we've got the Royal Infirmary. When you talk about community places, what do you mean?
So that would be house-to-house nursing.
Oh, right. So you would have to go to visit people in their houses.
Yeah.
Right. And would you have a mentor? So Mariya talked about having a mentor.
Exactly,
so were you assigned to someone?
Yeah, and you have your book of competencies that you have to be signed off for.
Okay.
It gets more intense as the years go by.
And did you need to do 3 years?
Yeah.
So once you'd done your 3 years, were you a fully fledged practice nurse?
No. So I finished my 3 years as an adult nurse, and then practice nursing is completely different, like I mentioned. So we don't get trained to be a practice nurse within the 3 years. So I had to do my training fresh again from qualifying to be able to be a practice nurse.
So where would you do that?
So you are employed by your practice and they will send you off for training, but there is a course that you can do post-grad, but I didn't do that. It's not compulsory.
Okay, so when you say you're a practice nurse, and this is going to sound really ignorant. Maybe the listeners are a little bit more wiser than I am. Does that mean you work in a surgery and you do things like blood tests, give out injections, do all those other gory things that happen in surgeries? Is that kind of what you do?
That's correct. And there's diabetic reviews, asthma reviews, smear tests, childhood immunizations as well. Okay,
lovely. And did you choose the practice you wanted to work at and apply there?
Truthfully speaking, I struggled a lot when I was applying because it was really difficult to get into. It still is to an extent right now. So I was applying wherever I could locally, and it was this job that I have right now, which I didn't expect to get through, but alhamdulillah.
Okay. So you're telling the listeners it's actually quite tough.
Yeah.
Okay.
So with uni in your third year, you're supported to get a job in the hospitals. it's a whole process that involves the uni and the hospitals. But with practice nursing, you have to apply independently.
Right.
So when it came to my turn in third year, there was no support because it was like, no, you should go and work in the hospital for 1 year. And I know I didn't want to do that.
Why? That was going to be my question. What made you decide you wanted to go straight into surgeries?
I feel like hospitals aren't for me, and they're not going to be for every nurse that are out there. I struggled with the long shifts. I couldn't cope with being on days one night and then nights the next week. You know, it's I found it personally difficult. I prefer having that long-term relationship with patients and building that bond with them, and you know, that continuous care, rather than looking after patients for a few days and it's a quick turnover.
Of course, because in hospitals people come and people go. Okay, thank you, Yusra. I'm going to go back to Mariya now. There was a question and it's gone. Yusra talked about shift work. How does it work? How does it work for a paramedic? Do you have, because presumably, Yusra, you have like not 9 to 5, but a pretty routine, Monday to Friday kind of schedule. What about yourself?
So whilst I was at uni, you kind of have to follow your mentor's timetable. So if they're on days, nights, so generally I did 4 days and then 4 days off and then 4 nights. And it was difficult, like Yusra said, getting, you know, your body clock back from a day to night, or you could do sometimes 2 days, 2 nights, 4 days off. So it just varies. It depends what your mentor is on. I did find it really difficult.
Yeah, I was going to say, how do you manage Ramadan, fasting, Salah, and then also the shift work and day night? How does that all work?
It is really difficult. It's mentally, physically draining. You know, any opportunity you kind of take to go pray your Salah, even if that's in the back of the ambulance, you know, you do that. Sometimes we've been on the way to jobs, you know, someone could be having a cardiac arrest, for example, or, you know, quite major jobs, and I'm in the back, like eating, trying to open my fast, or have something at least to just keep me hydrated. But yeah, it was difficult. Now, alhamdulillah, that I've graduated, like Yusra said, I don't really like, as in hospital-based ward care, role. So I've actually gone into private work.
Okay, but you're wearing an NHS uniform. What does that mean?
So you can do that at the same time. So at the moment, I have graduated, so I'm applying for a graduate job with the NHS, but I am working at event work at the moment.
What does that mean?
So you cover events. So so football, rugby, concerts, you know, stuff like that. You just be there as a medic, standby if anything goes wrong.
Sounds fascinating. Yeah. Is that just in Leicester, or do you travel to do that?
No, anywhere. So that is in Leeds, Manchester, Coventry, Birmingham. They've got the gaming at NEC at the moment, so we would cover that on the weekend. We cover the football games, the rugby games, the netball games. At the moment I'm just doing that, but inshallah I do want to go into, I will have a full-time job soon.
Yeah, inshallah. We make dua Ramadan, and it's Friday. It's the right time to make those duas. I mean, you know, one of the things I did want to ask you, because obviously you wear a hijab. Is this obviously, and you've talked about kind of being the medic at games and at football, rugby. Has the hijab been difficult? Have people looked at you and gone, that's a bit unusual, or have they just taken it in their stride?
So generally, the role itself, you hardly see hijabi paramedics. First of all, you know, it's a new thing. It used to be a male-dominated role. You know, now, alhamdulillah, more women are going into it. Being a hijabi, I think I did struggle at first. You know, being out on placement, or even on station where you work at the moment, there's over like 200 staff, and I'm the only hijabi paramedic there.
Mashallah, may Allah make it easy for you.
Yeah, you do get the looks sometimes, you do get the comments, but I just have to take it on and just
enjoy it.
You know, yeah.
I mean, do your parents worry about you? Because you told the listeners how old you were, so you obviously, you know, I'm guessing you're still living at home.
So I'm married now. So
okay, mashallah. So does your husband worry about you?
So at first my mum was scared when I first started the role. She was like, you know, I'm a bit fearful, like, you know, are you sure you know what you're getting yourself into and stuff like that. And she'd always make sure, she'd ring me whilst I'm on shift, are you okay? But alhamdulillah, now obviously I moved in with my in-laws. I think he's quite supportive, and you know, he's not really worried in that sense because he knows that there's, you know, like the safety, there's help around it if ever we get into a situation.
You're never on your own, is that right? You're always you're
Correct.
with someone else.
You are always with someone else. There's always two of you.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay, mashallah. I'm going to go to Yusra. Before I do that, I'm just going to remind the listeners at home, you are listening to Ramadan FM. The show is Let's Talk with Sabiha, and the two guests that I have in the studio today is Mariya, who's a paramedic, and I have Yusra, who's a practice nurse. And if you do have any questions that you would like to ask our paramedic and our practice nurse, the WhatsApp number here in the studio is 077 48 855 055. So that's 077 48 855 055. So if you have any questions about, you know, what they've enjoyed or anything that you want to know about the job, the studies, please do WhatsApp in and we'll try and answer those questions. So Yusra, we spoke to Mariya about the difficulties, not the difficulties necessarily, but being a minority in a profession which is largely male dominated, but not just that, but being a minority, being the only hijabi in a profession where people necessarily don't cover. Have you found the same whilst you were training, for example?
There is a lot of it out there. It can come from staff, it can come from patients, but again, you just have to deal with it.
And Mariya obviously has somebody else with her at the time. As a practice nurse, particularly when you were doing your training and you were on the wards, would you be on your own dealing with patients?
There's always nurses around you or healthcare assistants. You're never alone, but there could be a time where you're caring for a patient, doing something alone. But generally speaking, there are people around you.
Okay.
But as a student, if it's coming from a staff, I never spoke up because I was obviously a first year student, really scared. But you need to speak up if you're being treated incorrectly.
Okay.
Whether that's because you're a minority, whether you wear a scarf, or it's wrong.
Has it gotten easier?
Definitely, like alhamdulillah, now I'm working with mainly South Asian patients, so I feel more appreciated, which is sad because you're here to nurse everybody, not just our people.
No, but you look like you're enjoying yourself. So, and it is a tough job, and I admire you. I mean, one of the things I want to ask you about, Yusra, is kind of the highs and the lows. What would you say are the things that make you smile, the things that make you pleased that that you chose this profession?
Practice nursing or nursing in general? Nursing?
Entirely up to you.
Making that difference. For me, because I see my patients regularly, when I give advice and they come back to me and I see positive results, or they then understand something they never did before, that means the world to me, because that's education that can go very far.
Okay.
There's times where patients come in and they don't want services, they don't want to take on any services because say the family has denied them, but it's that lack of education. So when they come in, I'm able to then educate them and tell them, this is the reason as to why we're offering this and what benefits it has.
So fabulous. So you're making a difference.
Yeah.
What about the stresses though? I mean, you're making a difference. It's fantastic. Is it tough? What are the stresses? What make you think, is there anything that makes you think, maybe I should have chosen a different career?
Okay.
Okay.
No,
I agree.
As a student, it was probably dealing with death. I hadn't seen many deaths in my life, or any at all actually in front of me. As soon as I went on my first placement, I was faced with a death, and that became very regular. I mean, Mariya will probably be able to relate sudden deaths as well. You know what you're getting into, and nursing comes with it, but it's different being there firsthand and dealing with it after.
And do you get support? Is there something in place?
Yeah, there is, but I think it's a shock, isn't it, when you go in not having seen that before, and then having to witness it. I mean, for us, alhamdulillah, when it comes to time of death, we've normally got people around us. Yeah. It was a different kind of culture that I saw in the hospitals where patients would be passing away alone because the family preferred not to be there. That's personal preference, but that was something I wasn't used to seeing. But in the good sense of it, alhamdulillah, Allah chose us to be there by that patient's side. So it's just trying to put positive into the negative and seeing the difference that you are making and why Allah has chosen you to be there.
Wow, that's very inspiring. That's very inspiring, and I'm guessing you have to be very strong to make sure that happens. So I'm going to ask you the same questions, Mariya. Highs, lows, regrets.
So I'd say a high is I feel like the NHS generally wasn't as appreciated as much. But since the pandemic, you know, the claps and stuff, even though, you know, it did make us feel a little happier. It felt like people were supporting us, appreciating us more. Yeah, it is a rewarding job itself, just generally, like people, you know, thank you, praise you so much for what we do. There were times where people would buy us lunch, you know, there's this thing called HIT, where they hit the ambulances with like snacks and stuff. So they would leave us things with little messages, which was really sweet of them, you know, and that just kept us going. Good colleagues, positive vibes. However, like Yusra said, on the other hand, you know, I think COVID really did affect all of us. You know, we were daily bagging up bodies, and for us to see that, and I feel like, you know, there's going to be a lot of PTSD that a lot of NHS workers will be facing in the upcoming years. There is mental health support, but I think there needs to be more. You know, it's still a taboo subject. You kind of got to get on with it.
Let me just explain to the listeners, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. So it's something that maybe doesn't affect you at the time, but then obviously afterwards, when you have flashbacks of that, you remember the trauma that came with it. Sorry, I interrupted.
No, that's fine. You know, and it is scary. It's very scary, you know, seeing people die without their loved ones. Like Yusra said, we'd have to be there, hold their hands on, you know, the last moment. But I feel like, alhamdulillah, I'm glad, like Yusra said, I was there for them, you know, and I think my faith plays a massive role. I felt like this is obviously the will of Allah, and it was meant to be, and that brought more comfort to me when someone was passing.
MashaAllah. I don't know if I could do that. I'm just going to have a look at my questions again. You've talked about the highs, you've talked about the lows. Any regrets? Do you wish you chose? Because when I read your bio, what I figured was this is something you always wanted to do. You were going to be a paramedic, and now you've made it. So is it what you thought, or is it you're thinking,
I feel like I didn't know what I was getting into before I got into this role. It's always been my dream. Growing up, I wanted to be a paramedic. Alhamdulillah, I've done it now. I maybe I misjudged how hard it would be, how mentally and physically draining it would be. But once I've done it, I do love my job, and I wouldn't change it for the world.
Okay, mashallah. How do you think you're going to juggle this further down the line when you've got other responsibilities?
So at the moment, I would obviously be on the front line. I think once I have children and settle down in a family, then like Yusra works in the GP, we can actually be medics through GP home visits. Okay. So we can work for GPs and do home visits for people, and go into more, you know, primary care or secondary care in that sense, do minor injuries and stuff like that, or just do event work, which is you pick your shifts whenever you want to.
Right. And is there promotion? I mean, you know, can you work your way up? What happens to a paramedic once they've become a paramedic?
So once you become a paramedic, you still have to apply for a job. So you don't guarantee, there is a high success rate. However, you still have to go through the process, which I'm doing at the moment, of going through the interview process. You have to do a fitness test and a C1 driving test. So I forgot to mention that earlier.
Is this where you have to drive like the ambulance and pass a driving test?
That's it. So on top of your normal license, you need a C1 provisional, and then you need a C1 license.
Is that tough?
It wasn't too bad, to be fair. It's just a theory and then another test. It costs about £1,000.
What?
Yeah, that.
And do you get fund? You have to pay for it yourself. Wow. Okay.
So I think that sense, you know, that in its sense, being a student, being broke, you know, and then being in debt, then I had to pay for everything yourself. That was a bit difficult.
And this is going to sound really stupid. You don't own the ambulance, right?
You don't
they lend it to you. But are you insured on the ambulance?
You are insured. So basically, if you're working for the trust, you'd be under their insurance.
Right, okay.
You know, they have different liability insurance. However, you can also legally get legal indemnity insurance, where you can join College of Paramedics, and they are part of us, or Unison, which is
a union.
That's it, and they will protect you. And I've got both of them. So, but yeah, I forgot to mention you need a C1 driving license.
I'm shaking my head because I still struggle with reverse round the corner. I'm trying to reverse an ambulance. I don't even want to think about that.
Yeah, there's no cameras in the back either.
Alhamdulillah,
But-
alhamdulillah.
Yeah, once you do the C1, you also do a blue light training course.
Okay.
They put you through it, which is really fun. I'm looking forward to doing mine, where you basically, you can drive at high speeds.
Wow. So basically, what you're saying to me at the moment is they've not let you loose on driving through traffic lights that are
That's
red
it.
with the sirens on.
No, not
okay.
yet.
So what do you do? Do you sit beside the person who's doing that?
Yeah, you say, so I can drive on non-blues. So
Okay.
I can drive on non-blues, but not with the blues on just yet.
And are you going to have to pay another £1,000 to do that?
I hope not.
Okay, mashallah, that sounds fabulous. So I was going to say, I'm having a look at my questions here. We've talked about the positives, we've talked about the struggles, we've talked about what are your daily fears? What do you on a morning when you wake up and you know you've got to go to work? I'm going to ask Yusra actually, and then I'll come back to you. Is that all right, Yusra? Bring you back into the conversation. Yusra, on a daily basis, when you wake up, what goes through your mind? Do you have any anxieties, any fears, or are you just bright-eyed and bushy-tailed every morning?
A bit of both.
Okay, explain.
I think it was more during the pandemic where patients were coming in, they hadn't been to the GP practice for a long while, and then coming in to see us as the nurse, they came in with so many problems. So there was a lot of pressure time-wise and profession-wise, because you don't want to miss any detail. So that's what it is, the stress-wise.
Okay, and do you take your work home with you, or do you kind of lock the door and then walk away and not think about it?
Some of the times you do take it home. It might not be the patients, it might just be anything that goes on within the practice as well. I've had a few funny experiences with staff, so
Okay.
which involves workplace bullying. So
Okay.
it's not spoken about enough, but
No.
yeah, it's
No.
there.
And do you have a support network? Do you have people that Mariya talked about kind of Unison, she talked about external agencies that support. Do you have agencies?
We have the Royal College of Nursing or
Okay.
Unison, and I would definitely advise to be signed up. I didn't as a student, so please make sure you do, because you're covered from the point where you register only.
Okay, so you've got a support network right from the day dot.
Yeah.
Okay. And what about yourself? I mean, I talked to Mariya about kind of promotion. I talked to Mariya about what next. Where does this journey go? What about yourself? Where would your journey go?
So as a practice nurse, you can build on to become a senior practice nurse. You can specialize in certain routes as a diabetes specialist nurse, anticoagulation specialist nurse, if I can speak. Otherwise, you can go on to do the advanced nurse practitioner course. That's a postgrad course. Or just applying to specialist roles after.
And where do you see yourself going?
I wanted to work with the immunization and screening management coordination kind of role. So
Okay.
it doesn't come by often, so it's just to...
So would you have to, so is it a case of you have to look for those jobs?
Yeah.
And would you have to move practices if that came up?
Yeah, that wouldn't be with the practice, so that would be kind of moving on. So it's a little bit different.
Would it be hospital-based?
Possibly if it's a specialised role such as diabetes specialist nurse, but with the screening and immunisation, that's separate.
And is it like because obviously I'm thinking about it from my background, is it like a master's or a PhD? Is it a qualification?
No, not all the time. Perhaps the smaller modules you can do for diabetes specialist nurse, but for the one that I'm talking about, it's more progression.
Okay. And would you have to stay in Leicester? Would you want to move? How does that work?
Depends where I end up, really.
Okay.
At the moment, Leicester, yeah.
Leicester's where you're kind of focusing. Okay. I feel like I've lost my train of thought. Was there something else I asked you that I've now forgotten about?
I don't think so.
Okay. So we've talked about we've got about 15 minutes left. I just want to remind the listeners at home. I've been talking to Mariya and I've been talking to Yusra. Mariya is a paramedic and Yusra is a practice nurse, and so the listeners at home, if you have any questions for either of them, the WhatsApp number is 077 48 855 055. And we've been talking about, the route into becoming a practice nurse. We've been talking about the route into being a paramedic. We've talked about the kind of uni route. We've talked about the apprenticeship route. We've talked about kind of GCSEs and A-levels prior to all of that. One of the things that I spoke about just before we came on air was kind of work experience and work shadowing. So Mariya, if there's somebody out there now who wants to find out a little bit more about being a paramedic, where can they get more experience? Can they come in? Can they do work shadowing? How does all that work?
So pre-pandemic, they were able to shadow on some of the ambulances and come out with us as a third man. However, since the pandemic, they have limited them. They might have opened them again. So what you'd have to do is contact your local trust and see if they're doing that for you. Another advice I would suggest is to join St. John's Ambulance.
Oh, okay.
So St. John's Ambulance have cadets and have younger people from the age of 16 where you can do event work with them.
Oh, wow.
As first aiders, and they would give you training, and that I think would be very beneficial. It would give you a gist of the job and give you a little bit more feel about what it is. So St. John's Ambulance, and they're actually based, there is one in Leicester.
Yeah, I do know that. Is it a bit
Centre?
like kind of brownies and girl guides and things? Is it that kind of scouts and things? Do they run a cadets group like that?
Sort of. So they obviously wear the green uniform. They would basically, so you it's like, so you do first aid training, and then you just go out with them in the white ambulances or patient transport.
Okay, that's really good. So what Mariya is saying is, if it's something you're interested in, St. John's Ambulance offer an opportunity for young people to get involved. So it's a little bit like doing work experience, but it would get you into the field, and as you said, they can go and do events and things, which sounds very exciting. What about you, Yusra? Is there an opportunity for work shadowing, work experience? How does it work in your field?
In the hospitals, you can apply as a student for work experience, but I think there's a limited number of slots, so you have to go through the whole application process, and if you're successful, then you can have that exposure. I know many people volunteer on the wards beforehand, so it's not direct nursing kind of experience, but you have that exposure with patients interacting, and that definitely stands out.
And is it something that you did?
No, I didn't.
What did you do for your work experience?
I did the first thing where I had gone in for a week at Royal, I believe it was, but it wasn't the same exposure as what we do as a nurse as well. I'm not sure if that's changed because that was many years ago.
Okay.
But some of the things were just working alongside doctors rather than patient direct care.
Okay. Would you ever consider being a doctor? Would you? I'm looking at your face and laughing. Is this something you'd like to do? Is it something you've thought about?
Personally, no,
Okay.
not for me. No.
Not for you. Okay, fair enough. What about you, Mariya? Did you do work experience beforehand?
So I did join St. John's Ambulance. So I was with them when I was about 17, 18, but I wasn't with them for too long. And then I just got stuck into it straight into it.
Did you enjoy going out there? Was it all you expected?
I think you have to go into this job expecting the unexpected.
Okay, I like that. I like that. Why?
Yes.
Explain.
It wasn't, I don't know, it's just that every day can be so different. You could be 1 minute picking up someone who's just fallen like an old dot from the floor, and then the next minute you're going to someone that is suicidal or hanging or murder or stabbing or anything. So you do, but that's the perks of the job that I enjoy, the adrenaline behind it, not knowing what's next. Like you said, could you do a doctor role? Not really. I think it would bore me a little bit. Like it's the same stuff, or I wouldn't really enjoy it. I'm out on the road, I don't know what to expect, on the go. So,
and you like that? Would you say that's one of the highlights of what you do?
Yeah, I really enjoy that. And also, I think helping people, I think that's one of the highlights. Like, making them, reassuring them. Like Yusra said, especially when you see your South Asian community, there are some patients that don't even speak English and they find it so hard to communicate. For them to see, like, for example, a white British paramedic to come into their house, they might feel a bit hostile, they might not be able to relate to them, but when they see me, it's like, they feel quite at ease, and they're quite thankful that they've got me, and I speak 5 different languages.
Mashallah, what other languages you speak? Come on, tell us what languages you speak.
Punjabi, Urdu, English obviously, a little bit of Arabic and Hindi.
Okay, mashallah. So I think, and you know what, I think, for the listeners out there, I think that's really important. I think, on the one hand, we've talked about being hijabi, and we've talked about how sometimes that can bring about negative stereotypes. But I think, those assets that you've just talked about, walking into somebody's home that doesn't speak English, and they want to feel, already they're anxious because they're poorly, they're anxious because they've had to dial 999, you've turned up. And the fact that you can speak those languages, mashallah, alhamdulillah, because you're bringing something very precious into the community, and I think that's fabulous. Yusra, what about yourself? Do you speak more than one language?
I actually learned Urdu while working on this job.
And has it made a difference?
A lot.
Okay.
So I could understand Urdu and Gujarati. My mother tongue's Kutchi. So,
Okay.
but not many people I work with speak Kutchi. So I could understand what they were saying, but I couldn't communicate back. But alhamdulillah, what I've earned from this job, this role, is actually being able to speak another language as well.
Okay.
So, and it makes the world of a difference because I can then communicate back instead of calling an interpreter. And, you know, it builds that relationship better with that patient when it's just you and them.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, I can relate because my father doesn't speak English, and there's been occasions where I've had to interpret, and it can get quite complex because some of the medical language that you're using is you know, is of a high level, and to try and explain that to a patient who's already feeling anxious. So no, mashallah, you're bringing great things, you know, and I hope that there's young people out there who are listening. I know the school holidays are on at the moment. I'm hoping they've gotten out of bed by now, and I hope they're listening to some of the things that you're saying, because ladies, you are inspiring, you know, in your own way. You are trailblazers as well, and I think that's really important. I think what we often forget, particularly I think as well, we live in Leicester and we're used to seeing hijabis out there, but I think what you're also doing is you're setting a precedence out there for beyond Leicester, and I think that's really important. I think we need to represent our community beyond. And when you talk about events and you talk, Mariya, about traveling to all these places, you know, you're raising awareness as well, and I think that's mashallah. And I think you as well connecting, Yusra, to your patients, I think that's really important as well. So don't underestimate what you're doing. You know, what you're doing is absolutely amazing, and you should be very proud of yourself. Your parents should be very proud of what you've achieved as well. And that brings me to, you know, what were your family's initial reactions? I'll come to you in a moment, Mariya, because I think we've talked a little bit about that. What about you? Yusra, when you said, you know, you wanted to be a nurse, what was the reaction from home?
I think they were quite happy with it.
Okay.
But when it came to actually doing the degree, and when I struggled so much in between, I used to cry to my mom, like, I can't do this.
Okay.
So I think that probably made her think, like, she always encouraged me. She never discouraged me, but it probably did concern her, like, whether I'd be able to cope, really, at the back of her mind. But she was always supportive.
I mean, are there a lot of, would you say there's a lot of Muslim girls going into nursing?
Well, on my cohort, there was only a handful of us,
Okay.
which is what I wasn't used to seeing, because obviously I grew up in Highfields, went to Judge Meadow, there were so many South Asians, so I didn't realise we were a minority. So I do know of many Muslim women that are nurses, so maybe perhaps it has been a growing number, but I think we're still a minority.
Okay, and is it a profession you would encourage, that you would encourage people to go into?
I would, yeah.
Okay, fair enough. And you've mentioned a little bit about what your reaction was. Do you want to say a little bit more?
Yeah, it's more like, you know, you're going into the unknown, you're going into someone's house and putting your life at risk every day, basically. And, you know, you hear stories about the 2 paramedics in Birmingham that got stabbed not long ago.
Okay, will you say a little bit more so the listeners know a little bit more?
Yeah, so they went out to this patient to go help him, must have called 999 for whichever reason, and then they've obviously knocked on the door, and as the other person, obviously the patient, has opened the door, has actually attacked both of them and stabbed them. And, you know, it was quite distressing. They both obviously got awards now for their bravery, but that can have long-term, you know, effects. And also for me being a hijabi paramedic, I'm scared that, you know, someone could pull my hijab or, you know, a racist attack. But alhamdulillah, I've not really had that so far.
And you're supported presumably by your co-driver or the person who goes out with you?
So what we have on our radios are emergency, like red code buttons. So we have emergency buttons where if we press that button, then that's it. Like, you know, we get everyone down. You've got police there, dogs, fire, everyone, your operation manager, everyone will turn up basically. Okay,
so alhamdulillah. So that's reassuring for your family to know.
Yeah. So in that sense, and we're tracked to a certain extent, you know, the vehicles are tracked.
Okay.
We've got cameras inside the vehicle, outside the vehicle. We've now actually, so since that incident, they've actually introduced body cameras.
Oh, right.
So
okay.
we've now got body cams.
So what does that mean?
So before every shift, we would take a body camera, put it on us, just clip it onto our shirts or jackets. And then if we feel like we need to turn them on, if there's any, you know, altercation, incidents, mental health, violence, anything, if we feel like person's being aggressive, or you feel like you're going to be attacked or anything, you just push the button and it turns on, just like the police normally carry a body cam. So yeah, we would just switch them on, and they've introduced that, which does make us feel a bit more safer.
Yeah, I can imagine actually.
Because it's just a bit of protection.
I thought it was on the whole time, so I was thinking, okay, so it's like a GoPro camera where everything's being watched, but you're saying you only put it on in an emergency.
Yeah,
okay.
If you need to. And a lot of the time we don't need to. Alhamdulillah, a lot of pleasant people out there, and they are quite thankful.
Okay. And what do your school friends say when you've, obviously these are the girls you've grown up with. What do they say when you tell them what you're doing now?
They always say, like, we've always imagined you being a paramedic, Mariya. Like, this is what you live off. Like, they've always pictured me being in this role. Okay. So yeah, they're quite proud of me. They tell me how proud they are, like all the time. Yeah. They are quite supportive. Like Yusra said, there are times where you go into this and you want to give up. There's been so many times. You might fail at OSCE, you might fail an assignment, and you feel like, I can't do this anymore.
No. What's an OSCE? Explain to the listeners.
So OSCE is a practical exam.
Okay.
So you get to practice beforehand, but it's a timed, for example, half an hour. You don't know what's going to come up in there. So they give you a scenario. Where Coventry Uni actually had a really good, so they had quite good ward, like as in ward replicates, and they had a replica,
like a dummy run thing.
That's it, and a replica ambulance there, and a house that they had built.
Okay.
So you so it was quite interesting. There would be different scenarios in each room of the house, and there'd be actors in there.
Oh, fabulous!
Real life. So they would tell you, okay, you'd read it. For example, you're going into the bedroom, and there'll be a lady there, and you'll be like, okay, she's got a gun in her hand, and, and she'd be there with a gun, or you'd be like, okay, now you need to go into the bathroom and someone's slit their wrist or something. So you deal with it. Okay. So what they do is they want to see you obviously deal with that in that time.
And they grade you.
They grade you. Okay. So they have a mark sheet. They watch what you do. Yeah. Obviously there's minor mistakes you can make. Obviously they have criterias. But yeah, you have to. And those OSCEs can be quite intense because you're trying to remember everything. And then you're like, your nerves and everything at once. So they can be quite difficult. So you do like a trauma OSCE, you do a pediatric OSCE, and then you do like an ALS, cardiac arrest OSCE. And it can switch up. They can change the scenario. They'll be like, okay, so now the person's breathing, what are you going to do?
Wow, okay. So you've got to think on your feet.
That's it. It's it's critical thinking. So they can be quite intense. However, they do always give you another chance.
Okay,
they support you. You keep practicing. But they can be quite. They can be quite difficult.
Wow. And what about yourself, Yusra? This OSCE thing, do you have to do something similar?
So DMU don't do that, but I know other unis that do for nursing.
Even for nursing?
Yeah, they may be. But we're more assessed on the wards or out on placement where we're going to be signed off for competencies.
So do they come around and observe you?
It's more working with them so that you're always under their shadow. So it might be a particular skill that they're looking at, but generally overall you're always working with them. So they're assessing you from the point where you start your placement to the very end.
Ongoing assessment. And I mean, we've got a couple of minutes left. So Yusra, was nursing something you always wanted to do? What do your friends think now that you're this fully fledged nurse?
Same as Mariya, I'm very proud of you. For me, I actually wanted to be a dentist, but I didn't get the grades.
Okay,
but when I was looking through the prospectuses and I came across nursing, it was more the reward for the akhirah.
Okay.
So don't ever forget that if you're struggling through your jobs within healthcare, never forget the impact that you can inshallah make for your afterlife.
MashaAllah. Well said, Yusra. Right, we've got a minute left, so I'm just going to wrap things up. So you've been listening to me, Sabiha, on Let's Talk with Sabiha. And in the studio today, we had Mariya, who is a paramedic. And we also had Yusra, who's a practice nurse. And, I'm amazed at some of the things that they've said. I've learnt a lot. I have been in an ambulance, in my career, but I haven't pressed the blue lights, and I don't think I would have passed that test. I definitely couldn't be a nurse. It's definitely not for me. There's a couple of things I do want to say just before I finish off my show. So at the start of the show, I talked about the Just Giving page. So I'm going to remind you about that again. So Ramadan Radio is supporting the Children's Hospital. We're raising money to buy Eid gifts for children who will be spending Eid Day in hospital. And we want to put a smile on a child's face, a child who will be spending Eid in hospital. So do go to our Just Giving page and donate for that. I also just want to say, please remember all of us in your du'as, so Yusra, Mariya, all of us who are behind the scenes here at Ramadan FM. I hope you've listened carefully. I hope you've enjoyed listening to our show. It is Friday, inshallah, so please keep us in your du'as. Please remember to pray your Durood Sharif. And inshallah, join us again. I think I can see Muslimah Matters, and I can see Sister Shifa, and she'll be joined by Sister Maimuna, and they'll be talking about Muslimah Matters in the next show.